Hi, everybody. I'm Nix. I'm the executive director of EthStaker. EthStaker is here to support solo stakers and help you guys do everything to help troubleshoot and help fix nodes or whatever EthStaker can support with. So today we have community call number 39. We are talking about enshrined proposer builder separation. This is a huge topic. It's got a ton of proposals that are like semi-related, some are alternative, some are compatible. And so today we're going to talk about ePBS. We've got some guests with us. First, I'm going to introduce our eStaker crew. This is Remy,
Hi.
Torsten, and Ladislaus, all part of the eStaker community. Barnabé and Terence, do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Let's start with Barnabé.
Sure. Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Barnabé. I've been at the Robust Incentives Group at the Ethereum Foundation for 4.5 years. Our research team deals in anything mechanism design, economics, protocol, crypto economics. And yeah, I've been thinking a lot about PBS. It was one of the things I've worked on, I think, probably the most. So excited to be here.
Wait, Terence.
Hi, Terence. I'm from Option Labs. I work on Prysm, the consensus layer client. And yeah, I have been in this space since early 2019. I definitely work on multiple phases of the Beacon chain. I'm mostly on the client development side. I'm not as heavy on the research side. So I'm very interested in PBS, mostly from the client implementations perspective, which we should probably go more into later.
I love it. So we have a researcher who's working on this, and we have somebody who actually is working on the implementation of how it will be implemented. Really quickly, I just want to go over some definitions. So we've some very key definitions that will be here are proposer, builder, and relay. And I'm sure that everybody watching this call knows what that is. But a proposer is the one who's going to be proposing the block. The builder is who's going to be building the block. Sometimes that can be the proposer, but in 95-ish% of cases right now, that's outsourced to a building market. And we have the relay, who is the middleman between the builder and the proposer. And that is a trusted party who makes sure that everybody is sticking to their commitments. So let's go over really quick why PBS happened in the first place. So basically, we had Flashbots build this implementation of proposer builder separation called MEB Boost, and that enabled proposers to opt into this builder market where they can outsource their builders or their blocks, and builders can basically bid. And it means that 95% of 95-ish% now is being outsourced. And so maybe Barnabé or Terence, do you guys want to say a little bit about like the current model of PBS and what it looks like right now?
I can go ahead. I think you described it pretty well. So you have these protocol legible actors, which are the proposers that have this power of ordering their blocks. They don't want to do that themselves because finding a good ordering that gives you the most value is difficult. You need both sophistication. Sometimes you need access to certain sources of order flow that you might not get as a just like untrusted validator, let's say. And so we observe today that, yeah, lots of proposers.
Frozen for everybody else too.
Yeah. Oops. Maybe let's wait a second for him to come back. Or I can carry forward. So let me see if I can piggyback from what he's saying, right? Basically, now you basically have this like proposer, you have your builder, and then you have this layer in the middle. I think he was on more of the builder side. So what advantage does the builder has, right? I think one bigger advantage these days is the builder has this private order flow. So builders can see these private transactions that's better than like other people. I think that's one big advantage. And builders are very also specialized entity. And then I think one of this like fundamental, not issue, but the last ideal scenario is that there's not so much builder's entropy, meaning that every block is built by one of the 3 or 4 builders today. If today you choose to use MVP boost, right? And that kind of brings concerns of the censorship. That I think there's multiple attack surface there as well. So yeah. Sorry, Barnaby, I carry over your builder explanation, but yeah, you can keep going forward.
Well, just for the audience, we're going to talk about a bunch of different proposals. We're going to go really high level just to talk about how they relate to things. So like some of the things you might have heard of is Barnabé is the author of Rainbow Staking. Execution tickets was one that was proposed by Justin Drake. We've got Pepsi, also Barnabé one. Proposer timeliness commitments, MEV burn. We've got so many so many different proposals, and we're going to talk about how they all fit into this. But first, I want to talk about what is the motivation for ePBS? What's wrong with the current model, and why is there this sort of concern about the centralization that it creates? And that can be for Terence or Barnabé.
Sure, I can go first, and Barnaby can jump forward. I wouldn't say it's wrong, right? I think it's like when we look at some things, we have to look at like, can we improve upon it in a way, right? And I think when we first did the merge, like I think maybe it was like a month or 2 before the merge, there has been proposals such that it's like MEV boost, right? And then we decided to go with MEV boost because we're worried about we want to decentralize block building, right? But for me, I don't think that was ever the angle, just saying that we are gonna stop there. I think that was kind of like a stepping stone towards something that is better, which I will define in a second, right? And then I don't think, like the current, the current implementation does have limitations, have bugs. And then the question is just like, what is the priority in terms of fixing it, right? And then first is like, and then also like, what is the compatibility? Because you don't want to like fix something, but you take like 2 steps back into something which is what we want to do in the future, right? And I can say a few things on like what is the current like limitation, right? So current limitation is that you have this like relayer in the middle, right? And then what is fundamental is that when you have something in the middle, there's always a latency delay, right? And then today the latency delay is that the builder needs to send their block to the relayer, right? Or the trade-off is the relayer just doesn't verify the block, and there's another way, right? Because there is an additional parties in the middle, that it's always going to be slower. I think that's one like minor downside, right? Because that relayer has to be trusted to do something. And then the second downside is that there's also additional cost, right? Because you have this player in the middle that player today could work for free or could not work for free. But if today it cannot work for free, then maybe it will extract something from the builder to the validator, right? And then that's something that you don't have to pay unless you have to pay, right? And then I think that's something that in the model of ePBS, maybe it gets cheaper from that perspective, right? And then another thing is just that Builder is a closed source software, and the relayer today, most of the relayer are also closed source software. And then the less closed source software you touch, the better, right? If today you kind of reduce the trust between the builder and the validator, you only have to deal with one piece of the closed source software. But today we're unfortunately dealing with 2 closed source software, and that is a lot of unknown, right? And then the third, and then another issue. Go ahead. Sorry.
Why are builders necessarily closed source?
Because they are closed source. Because I mean, there's inherent advantage there for being closed source, and there is also competitions, right? As a builder, I want to be the best builder. I don't want other builders to know what I'm doing, right? And for them, their incentive is more like cutthroat. It's more competition based, right.
So they have proprietary methods that they don't want to release, and that's sort of inherent to the idea of being a builder.
Yeah, yes, and they also have private order flow, and they have a lot more things. So I'm sure there are things they can share, but there are also things they cannot share.
Okay, sorry, keep going. I interrupted you.
Yeah, and then the last thing is just like scheduling, like it's basically like software dependency, right? It's like when you're writing software, you want to do testnet, you have to check, hey, are the relay ready? Are the builders ready, right? If today they're not ready, then we cannot release mainnet. I mean, we can, but given that 90% of the blocks are also to the relayer, you have to give them a chance to catch up, right? And that's also another dependency. Yeah, so that's all I will say, I'm sure. But Barnabé will add on.
I think it was a great answer. As usual, I can take it like one level of abstraction higher and maybe describe like, so you have this pair exchange problem at the heart of PBS, like the proposer wants a good block and the builder wants to be paid. There's a lot of literature on this problem that essentially says you can't solve it without a trusted third party. Today, the relay is the entity that embodies this trusted third party. And so the idea of ePBS is to say, well, we can make the Ethereum protocol the trusted third party. Like we already trust attesters to vote on the valid chain, like to finalize blocks, etc. So we can add this extra duty to the attesters to say, well, now you guys are becoming like the entity that's doing this fair exchange between proposers and builders. And I think there was actually like some designs of enshrining PBS very early. I don't want to say before the merge, but either like very little before or right after. So we've been thinking about like ways to eliminate the relay pretty early on. But then we also realized, well, do we really eliminate the relay? Like with ePBS, what you seem to be doing is you offer the possibility for the proposer and the builder to do this fair exchange supported by the protocol. But it's also possible for the proposer and the builder to bypass that and still use like the old system, which is MEV boost. We could go into the reasons why. I think I'm more and more convinced by some arguments that both Terence and Potus have been making on why actually having this protocol supported like path puts you like in a better position. It certainly increases like the action sets of proposers, so that's never a bad thing. It also allows us to take the posture of saying, well, there's this whole off-chain thing that we kind of have to manage, but kind of also we're in a weird place with managing it. And now we can say, there's this protocol approved thing, and if you want to do something else, it's kind of on you. But yeah, the politics here are a bit tricky. So I would say that's sort of the motivation of ePBS, like having a good protocol supported option for this fair exchange to happen.
Okay, so if I am going to summarize like what is sort of an issue with our current PBS model, there's a middleman in between proposers and builders. It ends up increasing latency, it increased costs. Well, I think one thing that you guys didn't add was that relays have no self-sustaining method, so they're difficult to fund. Uh, did I miss any? Did I miss any? And the centralizing idea, the idea that there are only a few relays and that they're able to censor. So
I think there's like one more thing that could be added there. Maybe like some of this messaging is not as visible as it could be, since it's happening like off chain. And if we were to add more of those on chain, it would provide visibility, and maybe other features could be added on top of that.
Wait. So one thing I want to ask, are we sort of seeing are there behaviors that we're seeing today that are a result of out of protocol PBS that we want to mitigate with ePBS, or are there protocol or are there behaviors that we may see in the future with out of protocol PBS that we hope to prevent with ePBS?
I think from my perspective, it's very I think it's very interesting, right? Because no one has like, I guess since Deneb or since Capella, no one was talking about ePBS until there's a relayer bug. So every time when there's a relayer bug, everyone just goes crazy. Like POTUS goes crazy and talk about ePBS for like 1 week, and then we stop for like few weeks, And then there's another relay bug and people go crazy again, right? So I wonder if today relay really never had a bug, like would we even be mentioning this? Probably not, right? I think this has becoming, it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like this turbulence. And then, but I think now, like when DNAP is over, like we're kind of at the place to look for like what is the next thing to work on. And it seems to me like this is a relatively important area to work on. I mean, being like compatible to the end game of the Ethereum. Sorry, I forgot your question. I'm just rambling. But yeah, what was the main question?
No, I think that we've hit on pretty much everything. So in terms of ePBS, who is the primary beneficiary? Who benefits from enshrining PBS?
So I think I look at it like there are three actors in the system. So there are validators and there are builders and there are also the protocol itself, right? So from I guess I will start with the validator, right? So from the validator's perspective, that if today something goes wrong, that is the relay or the builder, I have this notion of an unconditional payment. So I know what the bid is, and that's on chain. And then I know they will come to me if the block remains canonical, basically. So I get that property. And whether that is how much nicer it is the current static view where it's out of protocol payment, I don't know. But you get this nice property, right? And then from the protocol's perspective, you get this property of this like, so the consensus and the executions are kind of basically decoupled. So in a way that you could have a consensus block without the execution payload. Because of that, you can still get attestations, you can still process deposit. So like the FFG, the economic security still continue. I think that is also nice as well. And then from the builder's perspective, it kind of allows you to work with the validators directly. So I don't know the builder market that well, to be honest, like how much of a benefit that is without going to the relayer. But you can think of today, right? To basically order you can say today, if I open a restaurant, I can actually like serve food or like pick up customers' order directly and just deliver to them versus having to go through this third party directly like all the time. It's kind of like a similar analogy. So I think those are kind of the high level advantage. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so you've summed up crypto Twitter so well. We see a lot of complaining when an issue happens and then a week later it disappears. How urgent is this need? Is this one of these things that's going to be important to get done quickly, or is it going to be important to flesh out a bunch of different research and testing and implement it in some more extended period of time?
I think like I guess it depends on your person, right? If you do you look at it as a future? Like do you look at this block auction ePBS as a future versus today, or do you look at the existing? Do you look at the existing system as a bug, right? If you look at the existing system as a bug, then we need to fix it relatively quickly. But if you look at it as like a feature, like improvement, then maybe you can like kind of dance around a little bit more. You can explore the design space even a little bit more, right? And yeah, and then I think like from the last 2 months, I guess just from my perspective, not my team's, I am starting to see this as more like a bug because I realized, well, every time when there's something's wrong, when there's a bug on the relayer, and then there's 100 missed blocks, and it just, to me, it doesn't seem sustainable in the long term. So from my perspective, I kind of view this as a bug, but some people may view it differently. And then if I view it as a bug, then I think it's relatively urgent to be shipped in the next 2 to 3 years.
In the next 2 to 3 years. Okay, so maybe Osaka, are we thinking?
Yeah, or after that, yeah.
Okay.
Careful with dates. If I can just add to this, I think it's also a bit subjective, always like how should you proceed with like these upgrades. I personally have felt that, okay, I agree that there are these problems with relays. I feel like there are things we can build in MevBoost that would help for that, like circuit breakers, more local rules, etc. It's not fixing everything for sure. Like Terence explained very nicely that ePBS gives you, like, buys you a lot more than just using MevBoost today. But what I feel currently is like the most problematic thing with the market that we have is, yeah, we have 3 big builders that are kind of dominating. There's no real way for the proposer to input their view of things into like the block makeup. So I've been more on the position of saying, okay, something like inclusion lists, for instance, should be much more preferred to ePBS. Like, it fixes an economic problem, which is maybe, okay, like a different dimension than these technical delivery problems that might happen. But that to me is personally very, very important. But I agree with Terence that also, yeah, ePBS might fit in like this longer time frame.
Okay, I'm gonna summarize
Sorry,
that by
can I-
saying, go for it.
Yeah, so I want to add on to what Barnabé said, right? Something that I missed or I did not mention is that everything today that can be addressed in this in this block auction PBS, I truly believe 80% of that can also be solved under MEV boost today, right? I really believe that. But now the question is just like, how do you budget this engineering resource? Because every team has this finite resource, right? Do we invest in that resource to work on ePBS, which is more long term, or do we invest this resource to patch and maybe boost, knowing that it may go away sometimes in the future? So that's kind of another interesting decision factor.
Okay, but so I'm gonna summarize it by it's integral to the growth of Ethereum, but Ethereum's not gonna fall apart without addressing this in the next fork or two. No argument. That's what I'm hearing.
I think it's good. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanna sort of focus on how our audience is stakers, mostly stakers. So I wanna talk about how this is going to affect individual node operators. So I know that there are a ton of different implementations being thrown around, and they don't necessarily even all look alike. But in general, the relay is going away. It's possible that duties are being separated. So how do you see this playing out for the person who runs a validator? Is this going to affect their income? Is it going to affect the amount of resources that they're required to run?
Yeah, so in the current design, there are 3 ways to propose a block. The first way to propose a block is you can still propose a solo block. You get the block from your local execution layer client, you sign it, and you propose it, right? So in the ePBS, there are 2 phases there. So there are consensus phase and there are execution phase. And then if you propose your own block, it's still the same as today. You just kind of move the execution phase earlier, so you don't have to wait for this reveal. So you can do that, and that's no different than solo. That's no different than basically not using MAB boost today. The second way to propose a block is that you can get a bid through a P2P network. So today you get this header through this RPC because it's fast. But in the ePBS model that you kind of want something that's more trusted without involving RPC, then you can get your bid through P2P. And the downside of that is that it is slower because the message propagate to P2P are typically slower. But the upside of that is that you have more like liveness because of P2P are harder to break than RPC, right? And then the third way of proposing block is the most popular way today, right? You can get a block through RPC. So you can think of what happened might be that the builder just take over the relayer role. The builder opens this RPC port that allows proposer to code get header. So the proposer codes get header instead of to the relayer, the proposer codes get header directly to the builder. And then the builder returns the header, and then the proposer signs it, and then instead of returning the signed blind block to the builder, here the proposer just broadcasts it to the P2P network, right? And that itself is the consensus block with the execution header. And the builder watches the header. If the header has enough votes, then the builder will reveal the full thing at the execution reveal phase. So that yeah, so that's kind of how it works. It's not much of a difference than today, except you have this P2P network for liveness, but at the same time, you still have this RPC port. It kind of works like MEV boost.
Okay, so
Can I
that
just
was
like one thing?
incredibly. Sorry, if I can
Sorry,
just quickly kind of sum that
Oh,
up,
yeah,
that
yeah.
was incredibly technical. So from my perspective, as I understand it, if I'm running a solo staker today, right, the only thing that would change for me materially in ePBS is that I don't have to run MEV Boost anymore. Basically, I'm removing the maintenance for one piece of software, and instead my consensus layer client would talk directly to builders, right? Relays.
You can think of MEV boost as like today MEV boost is a relay aggregator, right? So you get
Yes, it is.
allows you to
Correct.
talk to multiple
Correct.
relays.
It's a relay of relays.
But you can think of MEV boost becomes a
Right.
builders aggregator. You can talk to multiple
Yes,
builders.
it's a
Similar
relay of
scheme
relays.
can still, yeah.
Yes.
So
So
similar scheme could
the
still
point
exist.
being, it doesn't get more complicated. It might get less complicated, and it doesn't impact directly the earnings of a solo staker. The other part to that is that a first step to MEV burn, right? Which would then impact earnings for everyone.
I think
Okay.
go ahead, Barnabé. You guys.
Okay, I just want to like come back on the you can disconnect from MEV Boost. There's a world in which you might still use MEV Boost. Like as I was saying earlier, ePBS doesn't mean you have to go through it. It means you can use the ePBS channel, but you can still get bits from builders of chain. The builders might prefer that for a few reasons. One of them is that they don't need to have a collateral upfront to pay for the value of their bit, so they can extract the value and then pay you at the end of the block, which is not something they can do if they use ePBS. So I could see a world where even though MEV perhaps like the market share of MEV is eaten away by ePBS, as a solo staker, if I really want to be maximally greedy, maximally rational, I want to have both endpoints active. I want to listen to builder bids on ePBS, and I also want to listen to what MEV Boost is kind of surfacing for me. That's just yeah. It's a I think it's an important detail. It's unclear how it will play out once ePBS really goes live. It also really depends on the politics of development, who wants to keep maintaining, etc. But yeah, in theory, it is a possibility.
Right. So the point being, I don't need more resources, right? I don't need a larger disk. I don't need more CPU. I don't need more RAM. None of that changes for a solo staker.
That's correct. Yeah. It should be pretty much same. In the worst case, you would have to maintain two lists, like the ePBS list and the MEV Boost list, but no extra resource.
Yep, exactly. You're muted, Nixo.
Jörg brought up MEVBurn. We can talk about that later because we have a whole implementation section to get through. But is MEVBurn a necessary step? Is that definitely going to happen at some point, or is that still potentially not going to happen? Or is the MEV lottery definitely eventually going away?
I would say, I mean, okay, there's still like you were enumerating like a lot of the different flavors and variations of PBS and ePBS. And I want to say also, this is an artifact of us like going through different IDs publicly. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. So MEV Burn is one of these ideas that's very interesting because I think when it appeared, we got very excited, and we being like researchers and also the community, especially the ones who love the burn. And so we're like, okay, there's like this thing, you can burn the MEV, sounds great. Looking more into it, like hooking the MEV burn gadget on top of the PBS, to me seemed like, okay, there's actually like a lot of circularity. It seems like a very difficult thing. I feel like it had fallen a bit in maybe not disfavor, but people were thinking about it a little less. And it came back like recently in this, notably like this long arc that I think some protocol designers are thinking about, which is we want to maximally separate the duties of validating from the duties of proposing execution block. And so if we think that this is directionally correct, and I would say to me, there's some evidence that's credible that we can get there. It's not clear exactly what's the solution to get there. Maybe it's MEVBurn, maybe it's one of these many acronyms that you cited at the beginning. But I would say directionally, it seems correct to me to think that eventually we'll move away like, from ePBS, or like we'll move to a world where we really decouple consensus and execution.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
think to add on to that, like I think the motivation for the current proposal, that is the block auction-based ePBS. Math burn doesn't really apply there. I don't think you can solve math burn because there's always a side channel. Even in the slot auction, it's still a little bit like iffy. I think the only way to solve math burn it's basically this ticket-based model that Barnabé said, which still needs more research.
I think this is all good lead-in to sort of talk about all of these acronyms that are coming up. Is there, so I'm going to lean heavily on you guys for this, Barnabé and Terence. Do you guys think that you could sort of categorize the difference in proposals? Like, I'm not going to venture a guess actually. Can you sort of like separate all of these proposals into categories and whether what they change and like how they relate to each other, sort of?
I think I can give like I can try. I mean, I've written a post recently that I think is, at least to me, like clarified a lot of this and going through these ideas. I would say like the two main categories are proposals that look like PBS, so proposer builder separation, and proposals that look like this other acronym APS, which is attester proposer separation. So the PBS proposal look like the validator is still given the right to propose the execution, like still has full agency over what they put in their block in terms of transactions, etc. But they decide not to do it, and they decide to give that right to a builder to do it on their behalf. So that's the broad class of, let's say, PBS proposal. Then you have these APS proposals, which are execution tickets, what I proposed recently, APS burn, which try to go one step further and say, why do we even give the validator the right to propose this execution payload in the first place? Like, it's clear they don't want to deal with it. It's clear that the MEV rewards can kind of come and bias what they're doing for the protocol. Like the lottery introduces a lot of variability, especially for solo stakers. And so wouldn't we be in a better world if we really had like almost like two classes of participants in the protocol? So one which is purely concerned with validating, and the other one which is purely concerned with the execution. And so you have like these two different categories, so PBS and APS.
And with all of these different proposals coming out, do you see one? I know that you're biased because you're actually coming out with a bunch of these, but do you see one of them as like a more likely path or a more supported path at this moment?
And so I think actually when the ePBS proposal started coming back in the discussion, notably by Terence and Potus did most of the work there, my first reaction was to say, wait, no, we shouldn't go with PBS because now we have this APS thing that looks so much nicer. And maybe if we do go the route of like enshrining PBS, we'll paint ourselves into a corner and make it potentially more difficult for us to like achieve this more ideal, in my opinion, APS world. I've kind of come back to this multiple times. I've really tried to think through, okay, is there like a way where we can, not smoothly, of course, because every time we need a hard fork, but iterate over things and try to get from one place to like the other. My favorite proposal currently, but again, pending a new one, is APS burn, which is introduced in this post that I wrote recently. And I do believe that there is a, to me at least, fairly clear way to get there from ePBS. And so, yeah, I vote for that one.
Terence, do you have a take?
I think I think the only thing I would say is that like I think being able to incremental update is very important. It's also very valuable. You can think of if today at the merge we just go straight to any form of PBS or Enshrined. That could be like kind of bad because we don't know what the market structure will be like, right? So as much as like I like to bash MEV boost, I am actually very grateful for MEV boost because it actually allows us to learn a lot about things along the way. So yeah, so I think this type of incremental upgrade model is very Nice. I guess the most important thing that for us to watch out for is that, like, if we want to do something, it should be forward compatible to this angle that we want to do. So we don't want to take any step back.
And one thing I hear, like, in Bloody Sauce, do you have a question?
Yeah, maybe just a quick take. So my observation here is that there are solutions, both Terence and Barnabé highlighted that for one, we can sort of get rid of relays and the trust as stakers or proposals, for example, and trusting relays. But then also what kind of stays is the assumption that we still need to trust builders, not to censor. So the B in PBS is always there, and stakers, solo stakers, home stakers, historically building their own blocks, caring about censorship as well, apart from what Yorick mentioned might be yield, etc. But I would be curious to sort of also highlight in all the proposals that you've come up with, what measures you have in store sort of to ensure that we can constrain builders, particularly with regards to censorship. So I'd be curious in like what you envision here, and I know Barnaby has multiple solutions in place.
I mean, yeah, there's a solution which is inclusion list, which is not originally mine. Actually, Francesco is the one who came up with it. And the idea of inclusion list is allowing other people to constrain your builder. So you say, okay, I might not want to constrain my builder and tell him include this potentially sensitive transaction that you don't want to include, etc. But I might want to do that for other people. And so the principle of inclusion list is inputting again some of the proposer view into the makeup of the blocks. And it's also why I consider inclusion list to be extremely, extremely important. And shipping it even without ePBS would give us, in my opinion, tangible improvements over MEV boost, in the sense that the builders of MEV boost would already be constrained by inclusion lists. And then looking forward, there's proposals to essentially make inclusion lists better, just make them more robust, have them depend not on the input of a single party, but on multiple parties. So that's a proposal we're actively looking into in my own team. And I think these types of things, they are necessary for any of the proposals that we spelled out earlier. Like, as you said, the B of the builder is always there. So yeah, we're really trying to ensure that the delegation is made by respecting the wish of the network as a whole and the network's proxy, which is today, let's say, the validator.
So in a sense, inclusion lists or similar measures are always part of ePBS. Is that fair to say when you think about it, or should we sort of from a mental framework separate them, or how should we think about them?
I think they're part of PBS. I mean, if there was no PBS and the proposer was just making their own block, there would not be really a need for inclusion lists. Like, maybe you could have some proposers binding other proposers, but you have enough mixing of okay, maybe I propose a block in the next 10 blocks and I'm like neutral. I will include anyone who pays the fees. So inclusion lists are much less necessary in a model where the proposers are making their blocks. So it is good in PBS models, including ePBS, but more broadly, any kind of PBS, including the off-chain ones like MEV boost.
Dumb question. Is a tester proposer separation, can I put that under a subcategory of PBS, or are we calling that something else entirely?
I would put them side by side. They look a bit the same, but I think the difference is maybe a bit too subtle to get into right here, but I would think of them as, almost like on the same hierarchical level, just maybe APS being a bit more fundamental than PBS, in that it separates the validator from the execution proposing, let's say completely, which that's, pretty radical.
Okay. And are there any other proposals like inclusion lists that you see as prerequisites to any of these changes?
So in the design we're working on, again, this is a blocks auction PBS. So there are a few changes. Sorry, the few requirements. The first one is that for the force choice, you need some sort of block slot voting, because the ex ante attack, which I don't want to go too much into that. What XNT attack is, people can look it up online. Basically the XNT attack gets worse under that model because of the builder has basically the builder gets certain boost in terms of for choice weight. So you need to account for a skip slot weight instead of accounting that for the parents. You need to count it for yourself. So that's one change, that for choice accounting needs to be slightly different. And it turns out the peer does crowd are kind of thinking in the similar direction. So there could be some reusability there. That's nice. The second thing we need is this payload timeless committee. So you can think of this just like a committee that votes for if the builder does its job correctly. By does its job correctly, I mean, does it reveal the block on time? And then the block is validated. So today we have this beacon attesters that attest for the beacon block. You have this so now you have this smaller attesting committee that attests for the execution block. So the idea is very similar. So yeah, you basically just need those two things.
Does do payload timeliness committees also mitigate the timing games issue?
No, so the timing game issue is fundamental in most of the design, because here you can think of the beacon proposer can pick their header at the 4-second mark or the 3-second mark as late as possible. But the only difference that when the beacon proposer committed there, the builder's block cannot be changed because it is committed already, right? So it's likely the builder will reveal on time, but then the proposal can play timing game.
Actually, the timing games question is a very interesting angle to separate APS from PBS. So whenever the validator has this power as a proposer, they're kind of always going to be wanting to play timing games because they're always going to want to pick the builder as late as possible, and so they're going to delay their thing. It's not a great situation, in my opinion, to put solo stakers into, like, because they're not as sophisticated, they're not like super well connected on the network, they're not as able to play the timing games, let's say, optimally. But if you do move to like this APS world where now let's say, validator is no longer concerned with proposing like the best block, the timing games doesn't disappear because there's still like this problem of I need to propose my block and I want to make it as valuable as possible. But the person who's proposing the block is no longer a validator. So at least you manage to contain the timing games in like the key parts of the proposer and let the validator just really perform its role as an attester, which is much less subject to timing games.
Cool. One thing I want to ask that is a sentiment that I've heard quite a bit in response to execution tickets is what is the trade-off here in terms of thinking about sort of taking more duties away from the proposer? And is there a thought of like, does this make a validator less relevant to the network? Does it erode at their responsibilities on the network?
In a way, yes, but I think there's still like a couple of questions, obviously, with all of these proposals. But the way I would personally frame it is to say, if you erode the let's say duties that validators have to play, you also give them like more amplitude. So you give them less responsibility. So you say, okay, now you don't need to do like everything. So as a solo staker, I might not be able to play very well the PBS game. I think it's kind of nice for me to know that I can secure the Ethereum network, still get like the rewards that are paid for the attestations, and kind of focus just on that. So in my view of things, yes, it takes away a bit from the validator role, but it might mean you broaden the addressable market of who can become a validator as a result of not being expected to do everything very well.
Is it accurate to say that this is attempting to identify the strongest, the biggest value that home validators bring to the network, or solo validators or independent operators or whatever, and sort of separate that out so that's always something that they do?
I think, yeah, I mean, it's good for them to propose blocks like with transactions if they are not censoring. Let's say the default solo validators is not censoring. But if we live in a world where most validators anyway don't make their block themselves, and I don't know the numbers for solo validators, like how much share is using MEV-boost versus how much is not. I would expect actually solo validators might have more of like, okay, I want to do local building because I'm maybe more altruistic, and so I'm willing to forego some of these things. But it just doesn't seem to me like a perfectly sustainable solution. Like we can't rely on a small percentage of the network providing censorship resistance for everyone. And so, yeah, censorship resistance is a thing that's not really addressed by like this APS. And again, like inclusion list is really the tool here. But at least in this idea of trying to fit the box to the size of everyone who's like meant to play that role, I think that's meaningful and it helps Ethereum be more sustainable over time.
On that note, Barnabé, you've also reasoned about a lot about what we haven't talked during this call, called Pepsi. Maybe you can sort of elaborate a little bit on this. How, in contrast to ePBS, APS, where does Pepsi sort of come in here, and where's the nuance stakers also should be aware of?
Right. Yeah. That's so this is a proposal I made in 2022 in October before Bogota DevCon. So Pepsi is like protocol enforced proposer commitment. It falls in like these two categories of APS versus PBS. It's like a PBS thing. So you can think of ePBS, where the proposer, before committing to a builder, can say, my block has to satisfy these conditions, which are verifiables. For instance, my block has to include this transaction at slot 1. My block has to be partially built by this builder. If I'm able to make these commitments in advance, I could say 10 blocks from now, I will propose a block and it will contain these things. So I can essentially do like in protocol pre-confirmations. So I frame it as a way for the proposer to emit programmable building rights. So tell the builder, you have to make the block according to the specification that I give you. And the original impetus of this proposal is the idea that as long as we do this whole block auction where the proposer just sells off entirely the right to their block and say, okay, you the builder, you decide like everything that goes into it. I'm just passively accepting whatever. I felt like this might be actually the root problem of why we have so much builder centralization, because then the same thing of saying, okay, now every builder has to be good at doing everything in the block. And we know that there's a lot of heterogeneity in terms of there's some CEX-DEX arbitrage, there's some on-chain arbitrage, there's transactions that may be censored or not censored. And so if we are able to almost like segment the block between different things, so the proposer is able to say, oh, you're a good builder for the top of block, you're going to do this. You're a good builder for the bottom of block, you're going to do this. And that's what Pepsi, in theory, would allow you to do. So that might be a vector to try and promote decentralization in the builder market. It's still pretty much in the research stage, but it could be potentially like an add-on to ePBS.
Add-on, okay. And then maybe to add to this, you've also, or my understanding is that this idea of rainbow staking is sort of this big framework where ePBS fits in, where Pepsi fits in. So with a lot of the ideas we've talked about. So maybe you can, and also like we've talked about keeping the constraining builders, but also taking care of that the validator set will remain decentralized. So lowering the burdens of bandwidth and CPU on the validator side. So maybe you can also give us a brief idea of what this rainbow staking framework tries to highlight and how ePBS also fits into this categorization of yours.
Yeah, I think all of this is pretty much coming from the same like broad perspective of, which is not mine. Like it's the way I think mechanism designers think about, which is like, okay, you have like an allocation to perform, you have like an allocation of resources, you have nodes on the network, people who want to participate, who want to get a yield, etc. And you have like things that, like services that you want to offer. And when I say you, it's like the Ethereum protocol. And so if you tell if there's like a single entry point for everyone to say, I want to participate in like maintaining Ethereum, and you tell, okay, you have to do A, B, and C, and they're really only good for like doing A or B and maybe partially C sometimes. If you bundle all of these roles for them, you kind of end up with potentially the lowest common denominator, which is like dominating the network. And so one way to think about decentralization is just saying, let's just assign like tasks to whoever is better able to do them. And so the idea of rainbow staking is saying, so we talked about like these three different things. So validating, proposing payloads like list of transactions, and censorship resistance. So these are like three duties which are, in a sense, pretty decomposable in terms of what you're expected to do in either of these cases. So to be a good validator, you have to put up stake, and you have to be willing to be slashed if you don't perform your role well. And so there is like intrinsically this idea of capital at risk, which induces things like liquid staking, etc. To be good at censorship resistance, you have to be quite decentralized. Like you have to have like a big set that's willing to surface many different inputs from many different places. So it really doesn't look like the capital you need to be a validator, let's say. And then to propose execution blocks, as we see, validators are not super willing to do that themselves. Like most of them are outsourcing it today. And so that's perhaps where PBS comes into the picture of telling us, okay, that's an early sign that the validators are already trying to not perform the duties that they don't feel like they are the best at doing. And so, yeah, rainbow staking is just like, let's say, an attempt at trying to formalize that a bit and really like precise the different tasks that people, like the broad categories of tasks that Ethereum demands to function as a protocol. And then who are the players out there, like who are the nodes, the people, the entities or the institutions that are better able to fulfill these tasks. So it's a bit separate from ePBS, but it does come from like the same broad idea of unbundling and reassigning and optimizing for everyone to do the best.
Barnabé, I'm now picturing you coming up with every proposal. You're sitting with a pair of scissors, looking at some job, some role, something, and saying, how can I cut this up into a bunch of different pieces to make it more granularly effective?
We have a meme internally in my team, which is anytime somebody says the word like unbundle, there's a picture of me that appears and says, we have to unbundle. So yeah, I think I'm leaning in at this point. I'm just going full on.
Awesome. One thing I forgot to ask, maybe this is good for Terence, because I know you have a paper about bypassing the relay there. What happens to relays in this scenario? Do they I mean, they're already seen as public goods. They're already very difficult to self-sustain. So do they go away? Like those are, I think those are some good actors in our ecosystem, and it's not necessarily like we don't want to keep jobs around that don't need to exist, but are we putting them out of a job?
Yeah, so just to recap on that, right? Like, so currently in MEV Boost, you must trust a relayer. So there's this inherent trust in the middle. You must trust a relayer if you're a validator or the builder, right? But in the ePBS design that I'm working on is that, so that must trust goes down to may trust, right? We are not like removing the relayer. I think that's a kind of like not the right way to look at it, because relayer, their functionality will always be there. They are just too powerful because of cancellation, because of the certain features they offer, right? So what ePBS allows you to do is that, like, instead of like saying that you must trust the relayer if you're a validator, like basically you may trust the relayer, right? And how much benefit does it improve? Personally, I think there's a decent amount of benefits it improve, like basically what we said before, right? But now what happens? So now let's go back to relayer. So we can look at relayer as an entity, or we can look at relayer as a feature set, right? I think the relayer as the feature set will always be there, whether that's absorbed by the builder or third party or something else, because like you can bypass it that way, right? But now you look at relayer as an entity, I don't think it will be there, but like Barnabé said, that it can still be there because you can still bypass it. if today like client software supports it, you can essentially go through that side channels and get the builder speed, and then the builder will basically pay you, right? You can still do that if the client supports that. But then I think, yeah, but now the question is that like, does the benefit outweigh the cons? I think it does. And then what happens to the relayer entity? I think, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think they could work with builders. I'm sure there are certain things that they could do. I think they still have a lot more powerful feature that they could offer.
Okay. I'm gonna give you warning on a question, but before you answer it, I'm gonna read some questions from the YouTube chat. So the question that I'm gonna ask you is sort of a takeaway. Why should stakers, why should validators care at all about ePBS and how it's implemented and what the plan is, and maybe what the timeline is. But before you answer that, maybe you can think about that for a minute. I am going to go through the YouTube chat because we do have some questions. Is there a danger to builders being closed source? And what is that danger? And is there an alternative?
I can give like a quick answer to that. I guess we want the builder market to be as competitive as possible. Like we don't want to be in a situation where there's just two builders that are partitioning the Ethereum blocks between each other. They could extract rent, they could do a lot of bad things. And so having more tools out there that allows any team that's not necessarily extremely sophisticated or doesn't have access to like a lot of funds, having ways to get started with some pretty good builder from like open source software, I think is valuable. I don't know by name, but I do know that there are a couple of open source builders that usually, I think even the closed source builders, some of them build on. So having access to like just a good default option that's open just make the market more healthy in general. So that's why I think we should care about this.
Okay. And if it's even needed, what's the incentive for builders to adopt ePBS?
So what's the incentive for builder to adopt ePBS, right? I think like I think there's multiple angles to the question, right? The first angle is that, well, that's a protocol upgrade. Like we have to kind of work under this model. Otherwise, like I cannot function, right? The second model is that us, maybe not the big builders, maybe the smaller builders, you have more incentive because now you don't have to go through the relayer, right? Because I'm not sure how it works today, but I suppose maybe like at some point that maybe the builder needs to go to the relayer and need to earn the trust from the relayer. The relayer doesn't allow all the builders to submit bids to them, right? And maybe there are some relayer that does that, and maybe there are some relayer that they don't do that. So therefore, you kind of have this more transparent market space between the builder, and that's also healthy, right? And also as a builder, as an independent builder, that I am worried about like relayer and builders integration, such that maybe I am at a disadvantage. I don't know if today I'm submitting bid to this relayer. I don't know if this relayer has his best friend that he may favor that builder better and give them some preferential advantage. And to me, that is something that maybe like a builder may be more like interesting. So yeah, so I think as a builder, there are definitely some benefits there.
Okay. And does execution tickets make MEV invisible to Ethereum?
No, actually, it makes it visible in a way that it's not today, because like the principle of execution ticket is the Ethereum protocol is selling these tickets, and the ticket price is based on how much demand there is for it. And the demand for these tickets come from how much MEV the blocks in general contain. And so if Ethereum protocol is on the other side of the market, it knows what the price of a ticket is, so it knows how much MEV there is. And in particular, it's able to capture it. And I think when we say capture, we usually mean burn. And so it doesn't tell Ethereum, oh, this MEV came from that and this MEV came from this, but it tells this is the aggregate level of how much people care to be execution proposers and have access to MEV, and so allows the protocol to capture it credibly.
Cool. And last question, when ePBS breakout rooms again?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think like maybe from Electra is in the better space, people can scale up the NetTalk forward, and maybe by then ePBS will be like a candidate for the NetTalk forward, and there and because of that, there will be more breakout rooms.
Cool. So Terence, why should a validator care about ePBS? What does it have to do with them? Why should they care about how it's implemented?
I think if you're a validator, you're proposing block, you want to propose the best block, right? I think that is your incentive. And then how you propose a block, you may not care. It may be a black box, but like the question is that like how like what the question is what is the quality of the black box, right? And today, like you have to touch two black boxes. You have to go to the relayer, you have to go to the builder, and then maybe like under the ePBS model that like the black box surface becomes smaller, right? You just have to go to the builder. So there's definitely less unknown there. And that is neater, right? And then you may also care because like you care about censorship resistance because now like now because now you have to deal with relayer censoring. Now you only have to worry about builder censoring and stuff like that. And you care maybe because of latency as well, because now like it could be slower to essentially you basically your block has more time essentially, and more time equals to more MVV. It could be more profitable. And they're just also, and then you care about transparency, you care about like, and that's also another benefit as well. And then you care maybe because of like they makes the protocol better, and it makes development faster. You makes maybe less bugs on the mainnet, and yeah, there's just multiple reasons. You would care.
A multitude of reasons, some selfish, some altruistic. I mean, really all altruistic or all selfish if we think about like the fact that making the protocol better benefits everybody who uses the protocol, especially consensus participants. We have a POAP. I'm gonna drop the link in the YouTube chat right now, so feel free to grab that POAP. Do we have any parting questions, thoughts, comments?
Maybe just what to expect, like what's the roadmap? Do we need much more research? Do we need is it what you just mentioned? Is it breakout rooms when more people in the community talk about it? Like what's your assessment sort of where we're going from here with ePBS?
Yeah, so I can speak on this block auction ePBS that we have been working on. So this is basically MEV boost just in time block auction that's happened Enshrined in the protocol, right? And then you have this another PTC committee that essentially votes for this execution block reveal. So that we have been working on the spec. The spec has been like kind of final-ish. By final, I mean just me and Porter's working on it. And we definitely appreciate more eyes on it as well. POTUS has been posting a lot of valuable stuff on ETH research, ranging from like for choice attacks, like for choice analysis, and also design specs. So definitely take a look at those as well. On the implementation front, we have an ePBS branch on the Prysm. We think we could have a definite up and running in probably like 4 to 6 months back conservatively. We definitely appreciate more client joining, right? I think besides this block auction PBS, there's this long-term questions of like slot auction, like how to move to slot auction base, how to move to ticket base. And that, yeah, I think that's more Barnabé's domain.
Yeah, I think there's still some relevant research items there. First, streamlining the current set of proposals that we have and really de-risking them as much as possible. Even for proposals that seem like small iterations compared to block auction ePBS, which, for instance, slot auction ePBS is one of them. It does appear like it introduces, let's say, nonlinear complexity in that like there's a qualitative step jumping from one to the other in terms of fork choice, etc. So there's going to be a bit more work in terms of consensus and understanding like exactly what we need. But yeah, my personal feeling is I think by the end of this year we should have a pretty clear roadmap. Like it's been a while that PBS has been discussed. I think it'd be good to just it's not going to be closed because again maybe the earliest for ePBS to go in would be Osaka, which is already like more than a year away. And then if we want to go through all of these iterations, it will again take a couple of years. But I think at this point it would be nice for many actors in the system to kind of coordinate around a shared set of like, okay, this is what we're going for, and we have a soft commitment unless there's a revolution or something in our understanding. So I think, yeah, targeting end of year for this clarity seems reasonable to me, and at least my own personal goal.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to following the progress here. And anybody else can follow the progress on ETH Magicians, ETH Research in the PM repo. They have lots of resources in there. Thank you guys so much for having us and coming and answering questions and listening to correcting my dumb understanding of all of this. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Thank
It was
you
great.
for having
Thank you so
us.
much.
Thank
Thanks.
you. And we're off.